This episode will cover ignition and starting systems. Name one general type of inertia starter. There are three general types of inertia starters: hand, electric, and combination hand and electric starters. What is a magneto? A magneto is a self-contained AC generator driven by the engine for the purpose of ignition in a reciprocating engine. Why are magneto ignition systems preferred over battery-type ignition systems for reciprocating engines? Magnetos are independent ignition sources and do not rely on battery power to provide ignition. What can cause a reciprocating engine to continue to run when the ignition switch is in the off position? If there is a break in the P-lead wire from the magneto to the switch, then the ignition switch cannot ground the magneto primary circuit. What is the purpose of the condenser in a high-tension magneto electrical system? To prevent arcing at the points and to hasten the collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. What does a capacitor do in a magneto circuit? It prevents arcing at the points when the circuit is open and hastens the collapse of the magnetic field about the primary coil. Where is the E-gap position? The E-gap position is when the poles of the rotating magnet are a few degrees past the neutral position. E-gap is the position at which the points begin to open. What are the three major circuits of a high-tension magneto system? The magnetic circuit, primary electrical circuit, and secondary electrical circuit. What are the components of a high-tension magnetic circuit? The magnetic circuit consists of a permanent rotating magnet, soft iron core, and pole shoes. What happens when the primary breaker points open in a magneto? Opening the breaker points stops the flow of current in the primary coil. The magnetic field that was emitted by the primary coil collapses. As this magnetic field collapses, the flux lines that cut across the windings of the secondary coil induce a pulse of high voltage current in the secondary coil needed to fire the spark plugs. What is the piston position when the spark occurs in a cylinder? The position is a specified number of degrees before top dead center on the compression stroke. What is a dual magneto? The dual magneto incorporates two magnetos in one housing. They share the rotating magnet and cam. However, they have their own set of points, coils, and distributor blocks. What is the difference between a low tension and a high tension ignition system? In the high tension system, the high voltage is generated in the magneto and flows to the plugs through high tension leads. In a low tension system, the low voltage is generated in the magneto and flows through low tension leads to the primary windings of a transformer coil located near each spark plug. There, the voltage is increased to high voltage by transformer action and is conducted to the plugs by very short high tension leads. When the ignition switch is in the off position, what is the condition of the primary circuit? It is completed through the ignition switch to ground. What type of ignition system is used in most turbine engines? A typical turbine engine is equipped with an electronic capacitor type ignition system. What three conditions are required to fire plugs in a cylinder when the piston is in the prescribed position? The magneto's magnet poles must be in the E-gap position, the breaker points must be open, and the distributor rotor must be aligned with the distributor electrode for that cylinder. What is a dual ignition system, and what part of the system is grounded when the ignition switch is placed in the right position? A dual ignition system uses two separate magnetos, with the harness arranged so that each magneto fires one plug in each cylinder. If the switch is set to the right, the left magneto will be grounded, preventing it from firing. What is internal timing of a magneto? It is adjusting the breaker points to open when the poles of the rotating magnet are in the E-gap position. What is the purpose of an impulse coupling used with a magneto? The impulse coupling is used to retard the timing of the spark to after top dead center for starting the engine. It provides a momentarily high rotational speed to produce a spark at low crankshaft RPM. What is staggering ignition timing? It is the firing of one spark plug before the other, instead of firing them simultaneously. What is the proper spark plug reach? The proper spark plug reach is when the electrode end of the plug inside the cylinder is in the best position to achieve ignition. Why is it important to keep track of the cylinders that spark plugs are installed in? Because spark plugs can provide a lot of information about the health of a specific cylinder. What is the function of the igniter plugs in a turbine engine? The function of the igniter plug is to provide a discharge gap for the current, which is stored in the capacitor. The discharge results in a high-intensity spark, which ignites the fuel-air mixture. When are turbine engine ignition systems normally in use? The ignition system is required only for starting or restarting an engine. What are the two types of igniter plugs? Annular gap, a long-reach plug that extends into the combustion chamber. Constrained gap, a short-reach plug that does not extend into the chamber because the spark does not remain close to the plug. What is the purpose of the dual magneto configuration? For redundancy and safety, in case one magneto fails. How can you tell if a starter commutator is dirty or worn? An excessively noisy starter. What does it mean when the starter relay clicks when the starter switch is placed in the start position? This indicates that the supply voltage is too low to supply enough current to the relay coil to fully engage the contact points. What is an advantage of air turbine starters when compared to electric starters for large turbine engines? They're lightweight and do not have the same cool-down periods as electric starters. Why do turbine igniters not get carbon fouled as often as reciprocating engine spark plugs? Due to extremely high rates of electrical discharge in the turbine igniters. What are the three parts of ignition system of a turbine? Exciter, ignition lead, igniter. What is the difference between a temporary magnet and a permanent magnet? A permanent magnet is one that retains its magnetic properties for a long period of time. Temporary magnets, also called an electromagnet, are those that simply act like permanent magnets when they are within a strong magnetic field or have current flowing near them. What does the ignition light indicate when timing a magneto? It indicates when the points are beginning to open. In terms of the engine crankshaft position, when does the ignition event occur? A specified number of crankshaft degrees before top dead center on the compression stroke. What is the purpose of the capacitor in a magneto? The capacitor prevents arcing at the points and aids in collapsing of the magnetic field. What is the main concern when preparing a magneto for installation? Internal timing. What are the three events required to fire a spark plug in a cylinder when its piston is in the prescribed position? Magneto and E-gap position. Breaker points opening and the distributor electrically aligned with that cylinder. What is the function of a duty cycle in relation to a turbine engine ignition system? A duty cycle allows the operation of the ignition system for a given amount of time, to be followed by a minimum specified cooling down period. Name three sources of high volume, low pressure compressed air commonly used for starting jet transport aircraft equipped with air turbine starters. An onboard auxiliary power unit, a ground power unit, and compressor bleed air from an already running engine. Name two parts of a starter generator that commonly require periodic inspection to ensure that they do not wear beyond operational limits. The commutator and brushes. Between the field and armature windings in a starter generator, which components ordinarily receive current from operation in the start mode? Generally, both the field and the armature receive current for operation in the start mode. What are the three components of a spark plug? Electrode, insulator, and bore. Spark plug leads perform two functions. What are those functions? Carry the voltage and shield the power from radios. How many windings does a starter generator have? The starter generator internal circuit has 4 field windings: a C field, a shunt field, a compensating field, and an interpole or commutating winding. What 3 windings are activated during start mode in a starter generator? During starting, the C field, compensating field, and commutating windings are used. What 3 windings are active when generating power in a starter generator? When operating as a generator, the shunt, the compensating, and commutating windings are used. In a solid-state ignition system, what component controls the spark? A microprocessor. What is used if an impulse coupling is not present? A shower of sparks.